Welcome to the Beer Connoisseur, Beer Buyers Club, and Gourmet Brewing. I'm going to hit one button right there to get things going. So this new live stream and podcast will be recorded. We have a new collaboration that will provide amazing opportunities to hear from great brewers talk about their really awesome beer. I'm your host, Doug Piper. And I want you to know how much I appreciate your allowing me to join you in growing our beverage skills together. I'm a certified Cicerone, a certified BJCP beer and mead judge, and I'm working on more advanced ranks. And each week, we're going to do another brewer-led guided tasting from a selection of the previous week's Beer Buyers Club offering, which will arrive conveniently in your mail just in time for the live stream. You know, there are very few other ways to get beer this fresh from breweries all over the country, combined with the opportunity to hear and ask questions to the brewer who brewed it. So we got a lot of folks there in the chat, and I appreciate all the activity. Looks like Todd and Graco, Andrew, let us know. Brian's a Fort George fan, apparently. Buckeye, Dan. We appreciate everybody joining us here. For those of you that are unfamiliar with gourmet brewing, we provide content related to brewing and enjoying the very finest in beverages. If you will click on the green follow button, you'll be notified of all new live stream events, and that actually helps draw speakers. So please take a moment, click on the follow link. It really does help. Beer Connoisseur is one of the highest read and most trusted sources of beer knowledge worldwide, and they have over 8 million readers. Their Beer Buyers Club provides an opportunity to buy highly rated and sought-after beers through Tavour, T-A-V-O-U-R. The Tavour app is available in both Apple and Android versions, and it allows members to purchase these unique beers which are delivered right to your home. Hopefully your state's one of the 24 that Tavour can ship in. And I'll put a link in the chat because there's a special offer I'll share at the end of the program. Now, I'm glad you're here, whether you participate in the Beer Buyers Club or not. And I hope you'll still grab a beer and learn along with us from the brewers themselves. So this is going to be a lot of fun. And I see Dan, we've got a lot of folks there in the chat. So thank you. Please share where you're viewing us from, and also make a note, answer our poll, and we'll also answer questions in the second half of the presentation. So I see Graco from Orlando, Andrew from Detroit. We have people from all over, and I think this is fun. If your webinar is not playing correctly, and I think we all know we've been home long enough now and done enough Zoom calls, that it does get a little bit flaky. Refreshing your screen works amazingly for this app. Also try and use Google Chrome exclusively. That seems to work the best. And also you can reduce the resolution of the program by clicking on, there's a little gear symbol in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and that gear symbol will allow you to choose a lower resolution. Down at the bottom, we have an Ask a Question button. Please do that. And I mentioned the polls earlier, and I'm really thrilled. I see all the chat activity, which is a lot of fun there. But don't put questions in the chat, please. So I'm going to switch to the overhead camera because I want you guys to see all this delicious beer that we've gotten. We're going to go through today. We're going to start out and kind of take these in order of the alcohol content. As a Cicerone, we know that the palate fatigue can set in if we're not careful. So we're going to start out here with the Painkiller, which is a 6.2% smoothie style Goza ale. Then we're going to move into Fort George's collaboration with the Grains of Wrath Brewery at 6.8%. And this is Fanzine. It's an American IPA. And then we're going to wrap things up with a 12% Imperial Stout with coffee and vanilla. And this comes from Mikkeller in San Diego, and it's part of their Beer Geek series. So if we're successful here, we can now begin to meet everybody that's on screen. I'll remind everybody, make sure our mics are on, since I appreciate us getting through the initial part. Now, I know we're about to dive into all these delicious beers, but there's more. So we're going to talk to actually the brewers themselves. And just like the order of the beers, we're going to start with the founder of 903 Brewers, Jeremy Roberts. So Jeremy, tell us a little bit about your brewery and yourself.
So can you hear me okay?
I can.
Awesome. So we are a little brewery in Sherman, Texas. We're about an hour north of Dallas. My wife, Natalie, and I started 903 Brewers in 2013. We started brewing on a 1.5 barrel system. Then we went to a 7-barrel system, and now a 30-barrel system. Big thing that we do is we don't like to brew the same beer twice. Last year, I brewed 62 different beers, and this year, even with the COVID-19, we're on pace to brew 80 different beers this year. So we always try to bring something new. We like to collaborate with a lot of different bakeries and restaurants in town, brewing different beers. But we're just trying to brew something different, something crazy every single week.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. So let's switch to you, Michael. Michael Frankowicz, head brewer at Fort George Brewery.
Hey there. Fort George is off the Columbia River on the west coast of Oregon. Nice sunny spot right now. We've been here for about 13 years, and I've been a part of it for about 10 years, starting off with the construction of the production facility. We run an 8.5 barrel, 10 hectoliter in the pub, a 30-barrel system in our production, and we just picked up a 60-barrel system for expansion that's coming up in a couple of years.
And Michael, I think you should be in radio. You have a radio voice.
It's real deep.
And we're going to switch to Dan. So Dan Cady, he's the head brewer for Mikkeller Brewing in San Diego.
Hey, how you guys doing? My name's Dan. I've been with Mikkeller just over 4 years now. We are a production brewery in central San Diego, and we like making everything. We do a lot of experimental beers, a lot of fun, new, exciting styles, and also things that probably shouldn't have been brewed in the first place. But we have a lot of fun trying and experimenting. And today we'll get into one of our classics, so we're excited to talk about that. Cheers.
All right, so we also want to talk about, since we can't travel like we used to, I want to hear a little bit about the highlights at the brewery. So Jeremy, we're going to start with you. Do you have one or two highlights of 903 Brewery?
So about a year ago, my dad had a restaurant in our downtown, and we partnered with him. And so our food is amazing. We do like gourmet grilled cheese, burgers, pizza, wings. And, our brewery is in an old warehouse. And so it's just neat to come. None of the furniture matches. The food's good, pairs well with the beer. And if you don't know anybody there, by the time you leave, you're going to make a friend.
Excellent. Michael, give us one or two highlights about Fort George Brewery.
One of the cool things about us is it's kind of like a little beer campus for adults. We have 3 places on the city block that we own. One is a pub, similar style food as burgers, fries, fish and chips. And then we have a wood-fired pizzeria on the upstairs. And then we have a tap room right across the courtyard on the block. So I think there's close to like 60 taps around the whole facility. So you can kind of spend the day wandering around. And yeah, it's also in one of the prettiest places I've ever seen in my life.
I'm going to take actually mine full screen because this is where I hear you hang out a lot.
Yeah, that is the backdrop of our tap room currently. It was just painted for the Festival of Dark Arts, which I guess isn't that close to now. It's been about 3 months since that. But it's usually got about 22 taps on place and rotating with our unique beers that we usually put out about 2 a week. So it's a fun little place to see some unique beers.
It is awesome. And Dan, you can give us a little bit of a highlight for Mikkeller in San Diego? I hear that's a pretty special place too.
Yeah, it's a pretty fun location to visit. We took over the original AleSmith Brewing facility back in 2016, and they were in that brewery about 10 years or so, or 15, I think. And ever since we've been there, we've been trying to expand into every nook and cranny that there is. And now we occupy all 5 suites in the building. We've got upwards of 700 bourbon barrels and wine barrels in aging, and just recently expanded our tap room to accommodate another 75 people. So hopefully, once we all kind of shake out of this current situation, we can have people by and have a nice party. But yeah, the summer's looking pretty big for us. So we're hoping to continue putting out fun beers and get everybody back in again.
Well, excellent. Well, one thing I have heard in feedback from a lot of our viewers is don't wait too long to open a beer.
Yep.
So we've got 3 of them to go through. So this is going to be a lot of fun, and they're all quite different from each other. So I appreciate that, and the contrast is. So Jeremy, we're going to start with you. I'm going to switch to the overhead camera. And Michael and Dan, we will see you guys when we get to yours in just a few minutes. So I'm going to turn off your camera so we can zero in here. All right. So Jeremy, I am going to switch to the overhead camera and look in on this beer. So why don't you walk us through Painkiller a little bit?
Yeah. So, it's kind of funny for us starting late with our ABV, or starting first with our ABV being so low. One of the things that we're known for is brewing really high alcohol or ABV beers. Our average ABV, I think, in the brewery is around 10%. We're releasing a beer tomorrow in our tap room that's 13%. It's going to be on Taver. Matter of fact, they picked it up today. But this has been a beer that's really taken off for us, and it's our slushy styles. So we took our Goza base, and it's heavily fruited. We get a fresh puree from Oregon fruit, and we add it to a beer. This batch right here, Painkiller, is inspired by our Tiki cocktail series. So we wanted to make it taste just like a painkiller. So when you're on vacation and you order a really tropical cocktail, this one's going to have pineapple, orange, and coconut. And if you have that in front of you, you crack that thing open and you just smell it. Unfortunately, none of us can be on a beach right now in Mexico. But if you were and you ordered one, this is exactly what it smelled like. The only thing that we're missing is just the warm breeze from the ocean and, good 90-degree weather. But what we can do for you is provide the drink that you would normally drink on the beach. And then you take that first drink, and it is as tropical as can be. I mean, right there out of the gate, it's just pineapple, orange, and then it just finishes with that coconut. A lot of people asked us when they were in the tap room, they were like, "Did you put rum in this?" And I said, I wish we could, but unfortunately it's illegal. But we did such a good job making it taste just like the cocktail. And it's 6.2% alcohol. It's a very sneaky beer because you'll have 4 or 5 of them, and then it's almost like a painkiller because tomorrow you'll be feeling it for sure.
Well, it's a beautiful beer. Oh, wow. So fruity. Wow. Yeah, get the coconut on the back end. Yeah. And the orange and the pineapple. That's phenomenal. Wow.
So we started releasing slushies about a year ago. We went down to Funky Buddha for their maple bacon porter release. And we were right next to a brewery, 450 North. And people were waiting an hour to taste a 1-ounce sample of their slushies. And here we were with our barrel-aged beers, and people were coming from the line from the 450 North to try our barrel-aged. And then, nobody in Texas was doing this smoothie-style slushy goza. And so we want to be one of the first ones to market to do it. And it has just taken over. 2 weeks ago, we released 100 cases in our tap room. And I think Taver picked up 80 cases, but we sold out 100 cases in less than 24 hours. And being a little brewery in a town of about 36,000 people, we don't have big lines or sell out beers very quickly, but this beer sold out. So if you were lucky enough to get it or got one from Taver, I consider yourself pretty special because it's gone.
Well, I got one more. I can't wait to share it with my wife.
And I don't know if we'll ever do it again, because that's the thing that we don't like brewing the same beer twice. We always like trying to be, just be creative and doing different beers.
That is a phenomenal fruit beer. I mean, that really is. It is so smooth. I expected it really to be sweeter than what it is, because I don't know, it's just an expectation, but it's just got a little bit of salt, I guess, from the goza characteristic, a little bit of tartness, and then just juice. Oh, wow. It is a phenomenal beer.
So, we don't ever tell anybody, how much fruit that we put in per barrel. It's kind of like our little secret. But, I'll fill you in for every batch that we release, which is usually around 180 cases, we have about $10,000 in fruit in every batch. So It's not a cheap beer to brew.
Yeah, but what I'm impressed with, Jeremy, is it hasn't fermented out. So much of the time when you have a fruit beer, and strawberry beers seem to be some of the worst, it just, all those flavors ferment out. Can you just briefly share how these don't ferment out?
So what we do is we actually add all of the beer into our package. All of the fruit into the packaging tank, because these aren't, going to a distributor, going to sit on a shelf, especially a warm shelf. They either go to Taver or they sell in our tap room. One of the things that we preach is, treat this beer like milk. Keep it cold and drink it fresh. And so, adding the beer into the secondary, there is a chance for re-fermentation. There is a chance for these cans to pop and explode, which is any brewer's worst nightmare. But, that's the reason why all that fruit just, comes together like a slushy, is because we don't add it in during fermentation. We add it all into the secondary, which is in our packaging tank.
All right. Well, my cans are in good shape, so you must have done a good job getting them to South Carolina.
That's good.
Well, that is awesome. I'm quite impressed. That is a nice beer.
So next week we're releasing Madras, which is a cranberry orange slushy, and then also we're releasing called Puff Daddy. And it's pineapple, blackberry, and marshmallow. And both of these will be going to Taver as well. But, we're trying to release these slushies every 2 to 3 weeks. And it's been really neat to see how this beer is gaining more and more steam. We're excited to see more breweries throughout the country brewing this. And it's just the excitement's there for it. And we're just excited that, to be one of the breweries that are introducing a lot of people to it, and we're having a lot of fun doing it.
Well, I'll bet you get some calls to brew this one again. It's delicious. Well, Jeremy, we're going to switch to Michael. We've got another beer to go through, so we're going to switch to him. Michael. Oops, I clicked the wrong one.
I'm here by voice.
Yes, I hear you there by voice. So I'm going to take you off screen for just a little while, Jeremy, and don't forget to mute your mic if you don't mind. All right. So, Michael, that's going to be a tough act to follow.
It is. The guy's a personality.
All right. So I'm going to set this aside while I'm getting this ready for the overhead camera. And you want to talk a little bit about what we've got here? And this is a bigger can, so I'm going to zoom out on it a little bit. Okay.
So as you stated earlier, Fanzine is a traditional West Coast IPA made with grains of wrath out of Camas, Washington. And that is run by Mike Hunsaker, which is a good buddy of mine. There was a question earlier, and why did we make a West Coast IPA instead of a hazy, seeing that's where the trend is going. And we do a lot of both. So we want to make sure that all beer styles are available from our company. And we feel like we do a really good job with both styles. And the reason we went with the West Coast for the spring is traditionally our three-way IPA, which comes out in the summer in about 3 weeks or 4 weeks, is usually hazy. So we want to make sure we have a nice balance for everybody. But this one, you can start off with the really unique packaging. So it's got a comic on it, which is drawn by Michael Hurley, which is a local folk artist that got really big in Europe, but he's just an amazing artist, singer-songwriter. And he also does a bunch of fanzines, which, if you guys don't know what fanzines are, they are these little comic strips that were coming out in the mid to late 90s, and just little fun plugs, usually talking about one specific subject, and this one is beer. So coming in at 6.8%, the fun part about this is it is mostly traditional hops, but not really tasting in that way. So it starts off with Columbus as bittering, and then Chinook and Comet, which are probably as old as I am. And then it finishes up with a little bit of Mosaic. But the reason it tastes so different is most of the hops were grown in the Willamette Valley, which give it a lot sweeter notes as opposed to that traditional bitter pine and resin that comes from it. So you'll get a lot of orange juice and a little bit of pine right on the nose, and maybe a hair of melon as a background. But then when you go to sip it, you get like a fruit bouquet coming out of it. And it's really light on the grain bill. It's mostly two-row with raw Pilsner with a hint of acidulated and Maltese special aromatic to keep it really muted and mild to let the hops sing. And not traditionally as dry as most West Coast. This one, in specific gravity terms, finished around 10-12. So we allowed a little bit of the sweetness to linger to bring forward the fruit characteristics from those hops.
What a beautiful beer. And
That's
look at the head on that guy. Almost 3 fingers.
Yeah, really pride ourselves in making sure that our clear beers are nice and bright, and then our hazies are so thick you can barely see through them, if you can see through them at all, right? Making it 2-point. Wow,
look at that. That is, I always appreciate a beer that visually, comes across that nicely. That is really a beautiful beer, and it is filling the room with hops. It is phenomenal. Wow.
So yeah, this one, the major focus out of all the hops is Comet, grown out of Crosby, and it's something I fell in love with about 3 years ago when they started growing it out in the Willamette Valley. And it is one of the most unique hops for being an old hop that got disregarded and being brought back to light. But it's just a showcase of that hop. And I believe it's one of the main reasons that we won the gold medal at the Oregon Beer Awards with this beer.
Well, now it's got some IBUs to it. What does it have?
Well, the fun thing is we don't actually test their IBUs because we believe they kind of skew people's perception of the beer. We have some beers that are lagers or pilsners that could rate around 60, 55 IBUs and taste like they're 20. So we try not to put them onto the can. Oh,
it's a very smooth bitterness, but it's a distinct.
It's definitely there.
Yeah, it's definitely there, but with a lot of nice, aromatics. Like I said, the whole room is kind of filled with it right now. It's quite nice. What a gorgeous beer. So do you have any other similar IPAs that you brew? Do you do a double or anything with the same recipe?
We do a lot of different IPAs, but nothing of the same recipe. So we have similar to like a San Diego style, Dan, IPA, which is our Suicide Squeeze, which is very, very fruit forward and less pine or resin at all. And then we have a Golden IPA, which is the Optimist, and then traditional Pacific Northwest IPA, which is the Vortex, which is kind of like our bread and butter. It's the first or second can we put out ever, and also probably about 30% of our production at our facility. But we try not to make two of the same at all. Make sure they're unique enough so people seek it out instead of getting them mixed up.
Wow, that will make a phenomenal summertime beer.
Sadly, that is the last packaging run that you have in your hand.
Oh, no.
Yeah, like I said before, we're coming out with our 3-way IPA, which is with structures and level. Structures out of Bellingham, level out of Portland in about 3 or 4 weeks. So you have the last packaging run.
Oh, wow. Well, I have 2 more. So yeah. I may be very careful who I share those with, but it's a gorgeous beer. And I love the pretty head, and it's really nice and bright. Finishes up amazingly dry, very smooth bitterness, but very distinct. Lots of hops, every sea hop that comes to mind.
Pretty much.
But it finishes out so nice and dry. Not
in a, make you want to have another sip.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to be hard pressed to stop here, but I've got a 12%er to jump into next.
Yep.
Oh, well, this is great. Well, you might want to mention a little bit more. Let me go full screen to talk a little bit about your brewery, because that is certainly a very nice.
Based out of Astoria. This is the main focus, the tap room. If there was a way to skew the camera to the left, which I know you can't because it's the backdrop, there's a 30-barrel production facility with probably the strangest fermenters anybody's ever seen. We're in a historic building that's almost about 100 years old that survived the town fire in 1921 or 23, something in that aspect. So it is one of the oldest buildings in Astoria. And our ceiling height is 12 feet. So we have 120 barrel fermenters that have 160 barrel capacity and 12-foot ceilings. And if you've ever been to a production facility, those tanks would normally be about 30 feet tall. So they're just like little UFOs hanging around.
So we're getting some comments on the painting.
Yeah. So Festival of Dark Arts, if you've ever been, that would make complete sense to you. If not, Festival of Dark Arts is the largest beer festival that is stout focused and also of the arts. So we have a bunch of different sculptures that are made, a bunch of stage performances, huge design in our showroom. We've had like 15-foot tall, spread out plaster designs of, I can't remember his name. If Brian was on here, which I believe he is, he'd be able to tell me, but I'm not seeing it in the comments. But just huge plaster murals and all sorts of fire dancing and blacksmith and ice sculpture carving and whatnot. And it is just real weird and funky. And I'd say the median ABV of stouts is about 11% there. So it's a hoot.
So what is going on in this painting? Or do you dare say?
I really don't know. We just pick an artist that wants to do something, and we don't question it. We just put it up. It looks like, the raven is a big portion of the Festival of Dark Arts symbol. So it looks like that's emerging from a human in a multitude of ways as his stout is falling out of his glass. Yes.
That is unique, and we picked this background from all the others because it was so phenomenal. So my compliments to you. That is a beautiful tap room, and I look forward to visiting one day. So before we transition to the next beer, any last minute comment on your brewery?
No, I think we'll wait till the open part of the conversation and we'll get to it.
Okay. Well, if anybody's got your questions for Michael, please get them in, and then we're going to switch, and we're going to bring up Dan, and let's see, there we go. And there is Dan. Thank you, Michael. See you in a minute. So Dan, those
Hey.
are some tough acts to follow.
Yeah, it's all relative.
Well, I want to bring this up on the overhead camera so you can tell us a little bit about what we're about to have. That is quite a colorful label also.
Yeah. So today we're going to enjoy Beer Geek Vanilla Shake. This comes as part of our Beer Geek Stout series, which has endless iterations and dates back to the very first beer that Mikkeller produced as a gypsy brewer about 12 or 13 years ago. So for those that are unfamiliar with Mikkeller, we are a Danish brewery based in Copenhagen, Denmark, and the brewery in San Diego is the first official brick and mortar brewery under the Mikkeller globosphere. So over the last 12 years or so, we've probably produced over 2,000 different beers, unique labels, unique recipes. But for us in San Diego, we do a few of the classics and a lot of our own recipes as well. So this being one of the OG Mikkeller brands that we just had to produce for ourselves. This is a big 12% imperial stout. It is brewed with German vanilla sugar and a proprietary blend of whole bean dark roast coffee. It starts about 32 Plato out of the brew house. It's a long day. It's really sticky. It's got a nice sweetness to it, but it stays balanced. The coffee that we use brings in a nice roast character, really heightens the chocolate cocoa nib layers in the malt bill itself. But the star of the show is the vanilla character. As I'd mentioned, we use a German vanilla sugar, which is very, very, very potent stuff compared to the vanilla sugar that we get here in the United States. And it's nothing more than dextrose and vanilla beans all blended up together in this kind of big mass. So we make this about 2 or 3 times a year, and a lot of it goes into barrels for other projects, and a small amount goes into cans. So we're thankful that you guys get to try this one. This is our newest batch, and every time we tweak the coffee a little bit to bring out a little bit more of either chocolate or graham cracker or vanilla wafer. So cheers, let's try it.
Cheers.
So the one thing we're really happy with this beer is the balance. Although it's big and it's robust and it's sweet, we do keep a decent amount of hop in the kettle so that the bitterness kind of holds everything up. We use Cascade and Amarillo in the Whirlpool, which is a bit odd for a beer like this, but we really like those higher alpha Cascades that we've been bringing in, and some of those like earthy grapefruit notes kind of poke when the beer is young. So it's a really fun beer. It goes through a lot of dynamic change, and there's nothing better than drinking it out of a 16-ounce pint can.
Well, but balance is I mean, it's balanced to vanilla very distinctly. Are you sure that's a 12% beer? I mean, there is no heat from it. That is a dangerous beer.
Yeah. It'll get you.
Yes, it is. I would have never guessed it was 12%. How do you get it, the alcohol, so smooth?
Well, we ferment this a bit cooler on average, about 64 degrees Fahrenheit. We pitch a lot of yeast initially, and we use a standard Chico California Ale strain, and with a few different practices that we've evolved to in our cellar, fermentation is a bit slower, and we can push this beer out in about 4 or 5 weeks or so. But the point being, we want to make something that's smooth and calm on the palate, but bring out a lot of the more ethereal notes inside of it.
Boy, it'd be great over ice cream.
Yes, sir.
It really would. It is a phenomenal beer, and I really enjoyed it. I just cannot believe it's 12%. It is very dangerous.
Yeah. Funny though, we have just been finishing up a big packaging run with some barrel-aged vanilla shake variants, and the barrels aged anywhere from 9 to 12 months, and coming straight out of the barrel, we're seeing almost 15% ABV on those beers. So combined with the base beer and some of the treatments we've been doing, it's just mind-boggling that these are coming out so smooth and quote unquote drinkable for such a high ABV.
Very much so. So the coffee, it's pretty subtle. So what can you tell me a little bit about the coffee and maybe how you get the coffee characteristics in it? That always seems to be a challenge for the home brewers in the audience, how to get this smooth a coffee without, the bitterness that can come along, or, it's too much roastiness. This is just an essence of coffee without any of the negative characteristics of coffee.
Sure. Like I said, we run a kind of proprietary blend of coffee that we worked with local roasters to develop. But one of the primary coffees in that blend is a Colombian, and we've found that it really kicks a lot of like chocolate ganache character, some dark fruits,
Definitely.
raisins, dark cherries. But
Yep.
we've stuck
Is it
to
a
our
dark
guns.
roast or a light roast? Is it a dark roast or a light roast?
Teeters on dark roast.
Yeah. So it's more of a medium.
Yeah. But we push it a little farther than their standard Colombian, just to kind of bring out a little bit more like char. But all of our coffee beers go through relatively similar processing. We use almost exclusively whole bean in our finished beer. So once it is filtered and sent to packaging tanks, we'll do a cold soak on whole bean for 12 to 24 hours, depending on the beer. Some of the lighter beers that we make, upwards of 36 hours, but we were talking earlier, we've got this like Sierra Nevada torpedo vessel where it has a false bottom in it, and we can do external adjuncting for finished beer in that. So with this beer, we've kind of dialed in to about 12 hours of a constant recirculation on whole bean before we push it all back into the tank and dose our vanilla, carbonate, and go.
Wow. Well, a lot of imperial stouts can be over the top, and this is so well balanced. Certainly vanilla characteristics dominate, but just right under that is some chocolate, some coffee. The roast characteristics are very low, and the finish is very dry, but smooth, and there's just enough bitterness there to offset what little residual sweetness is there. And it had a phenomenal head for a 12% beer. I mean, it had almost one finger for probably 2 minutes there, which is impressive.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that is a nice beer. I wish I could get that in South Carolina. It would be great at Mother's Day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, any last minute comments that you would like to make on Mikkeller before we move into the questions and bring everybody else on screen?
Just want to wish everybody health and happiness. Hopefully you guys are enjoying some good beers.
Thank you. All right. We will hopefully be successful in bringing everybody else back on the screen. All right. Well, we're glad to have everybody back, and we've probably made everybody thirsty as we've sit here and opened up 3 beers right in front of everybody. So we're about to move into the question sections, and it looks like we've got 12 questions. And, you know, if something's a little unclear when I'm asking your question, how about typing in the chat to give a little clarity to it? You'll kind of know which one is yours. I'll call out your name, and I'll try and direct these to the appropriate brewer. But if not, you know, we'll kind of do the best we can. Now, everybody gets a vote, and that really helps drive the questions in case we run out of time. So if you look at the questions, you don't have one to ask, use your one vote to drive up to the top, the one you think you would like there the most. So our first question goes to you, Dan, and it is, please share the details of the vanilla sugar that I understand gives the Beer Geek vanilla shake such a strong vanilla flavor.
Sure. We could talk a little bit more about its usage. I've been sworn to death if I give away our supplier, but like we mentioned earlier, it's nothing more than macerated vanilla and dextrose. Comes in a 55-pound bag, and when we produce vanilla shake, we run about 1 pound per barrel of this vanilla sugar. And
what does it look like? If I poured some in my hand, what would it look like?
It's kind of got like an off-white color, about the same texture as like confectioner's sugar, but tons of black little speckles and chunks in it. And that's the vanilla. And if you dissolve it in hot water, it kind of turns this deep brown color from the vanilla itself. But when we produce the beer, we use this vanilla sugar in a few other different beers as well, but we will take our vanilla sugar, we will mix it with a very small amount of water just to hydrate it, turn it into a slurry, and we'll bring it up to 202, 205 degrees and hold that for about 10 minutes just to flash pasteurize anything. And then we will bring in very quickly to that vessel cold finished beer to bring down the temperature of that slurry, homogenize it, and then spin it back into the packaging tank. Overall, it's very, what's the word? Predictable, I guess you would call it. We trialed a few different types of vanilla sugar, and we really preferred this supplier. And hopefully we can continue to bring them in because this stuff is amazing.
Well, it is delicious stuff, and I love the question because I'm fascinated. Vanilla is just such an amazing flavor, and it is phenomenal in that beer. So thank you. Good question. Next question comes from Chris, and Chris says, Jeremy, do you plan on making any other beers inspired by popular cocktails?
Yeah, so this week we were releasing Madras, which is an orange cranberry cocktail. And then in 2 weeks after that, we're doing the famous New Orleans Hurricane. So we're still working on what's coming up next, but our favorite thing to do is, get a nice little buzz in the brewery and then just start writing down different cocktails that we like, and whichever ones stick is kind of what we do next.
Next one, Andrew's got a very popular question, and he's going to throw it out for anyone or everyone. So Whoever comes up with the answer first, go ahead and jump on it. For everyone, in recent years, the recognized or perceived innovators of brewing have largely been driven by sweeter beers, i.e. pastry beers. How long do you see this trend towards sweeter beers continuing? Is there a particular flavor trend you would expect to come next?
Well, I'll jump on. We have a series called Down with the Pastry Art. We actually employ more women than men. And so this is kind of their pastry series that we've done. We just released a strawberry cake stout. We teamed up with a local bakery, and we used 300 pounds of their strawberry cake in the mash to brew this beer. And then we added somewhere around 5 pounds per barrel strawberry puree. And so the beer actually tastes just like the cake. We release anywhere between 6 to 8 pastry stouts throughout the year. And, we just see them, growing in steam, faster and faster every year. Do I see it slowing down? I think once people are more conscious about the calories in the beer, it will. Until then, I think you'll see them growing and growing.
Well, excellent. I'm really intrigued with that same question. The pastry beers are a fascinating, I guess, sub area. Dan, I wanted to switch back for you. It's not a question in writing, but you didn't comment, or if I missed it, if you did, what is this logo on the glass?
Jarl is one of our Bottle Club tier subscriptions. We have 3 tiers in our annual membership, Jarl being the highest member. It comes from Old Norse mythology. Believe it's relative to like a lord or a king or something like that. I actually haven't brushed up on my mythology knowledge in a while, but we use that tier in our club to push out really exciting beers. It's super, super small volume, only about 3 barrels of product at a time, but we really want to push the envelope with that. So that was one of our swag items in the latest club beer.
Okay. It sounds like I'm a member of Sierra Nevada's Alpha Hops. Sounds very similar to their organization. So I guess since I got a glass, I'm in.
Yeah, easy as that.
All right, our next question. Dan has this question. You mentioned Tavour getting beer this week. Are they getting some of that chop you cabra? Now, whose is that? C-H-U-P?
Yeah, Chop Kubra.
Chop Kubra. Okay,
yes,
thank you.
They picked up it today.
Oh. And so would you describe it?
Yeah, so it's our 13% stout with cinnamon, chocolate, coconut, and marshmallow. And it's also oaked age. And it is a sweet beer where the 13% is very well hidden. So matter of fact, when we're done here, I'm going to crack one open. I didn't want to do it here and get hammered. You can understand me.
Yeah, I'm trying to pace myself also. Well, that sounds like a neat beer. And I appreciate you helping me pronounce it. It won't be the first one I'll mispronounce. Yeah. Andrew has the next one, and this is for anybody that wants to speak up. Was there a particular beer that you look back at that gave you an aha moment and got you into craft beer? What a cool question, Andrew.
I got a couple. So I actually grew up in Chicago, Illinois. So I had Bell's and Three Floyds next to me. So Alpha King or Zombie Dust from Three Floyds, and then Two Hearted from Bell's were like the light into hops in the world. they were what started IPAs, in my opinion. Granted, I wasn't on the West Coast at that time, so I don't know what was going on over here, but it really showed me that there's more to beer than just skunk German beers coming over across the water.
Most brewers will admit that Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is their beer, but from what I remember in kind of getting into the home brewing scene through some family members, I think my first craft beer that really was like a mind boggler was No Shame, a Sam Adams cherry wheat. I didn't know much beyond that, and thought that it was really strange that there was this fruit beer. And I remember going out once and getting the holiday mix box or whatever just to get that one beer in it. And from then on, we tried to replicate that particular beer at home, and the wheels just started turning. And ever since then, it's been fun beers, experimental styles, but also really trying to get back into the classics every year, pick a new style and go for it. So,
well, this is a tremendous range that I'm tasting today, and what you guys have produced. I mean, these are like flavor through the roof. Great privilege to taste these with you guys. I appreciate the opportunity. All right, next question. This one goes to you, Michael. What aspects of the collaboration did Fort George bring to the Fanzine Grains of Wrath brewery collaboration?
We had me personally, not Fort George. I have special aromatic from Maltese Frankowicz is one of my favorite small percentage malts to throw into any light flavored beer, because it brings out this beautiful sweetness without actually showing the sugar content. And then Comet hops from Crosby is a huge thing for me. Oddly enough, I think we purchased 75% of the Comet that was produced over the last 3 years, which for one of the years was only 1,000 pounds. So it's not a huge amount, but loved it so much that we kind of really jumped on that. And then the third thing is dry hopping. I'm sure you guys all make IPAs and all have different ways of dry hopping, rousing, and whatnot. But for West Coast, I'm a firm believer of not letting it sit on the hops for too long. So we roused for 2 days and then made sure to get it really off of that, so we didn't get a lot of the lingering grass and or heavy fruit flavors that you would taste in some of the hazies out there these days, and or lagers getting that grassy profile of too much hops are sitting on it when it's cold, crashed.
I would say you brought a lot to the equation then.
There was a lot to make that beer. It mostly was about 5 glasses of whiskey and hanging out till 3 a.m. to come up with that recipe, but it was a lot going into that beer.
Andrew says ha ha, and Brian says and the whiskey.
Brian was a part of that whiskey too.
Jeremy, you've been hitting the whiskey too.
Yes.
Andrew has another question for anyone. If you could only brew with one particular yeast strain or another microorganism for the rest of time, this is a serious philosophical question, which would it be and why? So the question is, if you had to pick one yeast strain or other microorganism, Brett, who knows, which would it be and why?
Not touching that one.
Yeah, me neither.
Well, I'll as a primarily a home brewer, I would say it'd be Kvike, just because it's so quick and does a phenomenal job. So that's not from a commercial point of view, but as a home brewer that's impatient, I am just really impressed with Kvike.
Can you say wild and just go naturally fermented so you could have all sorts of different flavors?
I would say that would work, since I suspect the very first beers were that way. What a good answer. Andrew, what a deep question for getting later on a Friday. And Chris has our next question. Dan, who does the branding for Mikkeller It is such striking style.
We have a graphic designer, kind of Brandon. We have a graphic designer. He does all of our artwork. He does all of our merchandise design, glassware, you name it. His name is Keith Shore. He's based out of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. He's been with the company about 9 years or so. And he does it all of our cool label artwork, t-shirts. He works in collaboration with whoever is to do our interior design at any of our bars across the world, and really likes to have fun. All of the names that we play around with for our beers down here in San Diego, they could be whatever, song reference, a random pair of words. It doesn't matter. Keith will come up with some fun graphics to go along with it. And every year or so, he likes to change his mind. So we'll do a nice little deviation on some classic artwork just to keep it fresh and fun.
Well, I'll have to say that flat black really makes that a stunning label.
Yeah,
it is really jumps off. I bet that's a great marketing item. Good question, Chris. Thank you. Andrew has the next question. Have you had to adjust your QA as you've developed new beers, especially most post-fermentation packaging additions? Jeremy, we might start with you since you're the one that's doing that.
Yeah, the thing that I think that keeps all of us brewers up at night is we do such a good job, making the beer taste exactly what we want when it's packaged. What happens to it once it leaves the brewery? And so, with us adding so many different adjuncts, brewing so many different beers, one of the most things that really disappoints me and makes me, I guess just keeps me up at night is whenever somebody calls or sends us an email or a message on social media and just talks about how the beer takes off. And so one of the things that we really try to do is improve our beers, whether our beer is shipped across the country, the world, it sits in a car for a week. How does it taste the same as it did as if it comes off our canning line? And so that's one of the things that we, try to really improve during the brewing process, during fermentation, during packaging, but really just educating the consumer is, keep this beer cold, drink it fresh, and, enjoy it. But, we've had our issues over the 7 years. And, what we found is if we just really do a better job of taking notes, and understanding if we make a mistake, what we did wrong, so we don't have to repeat it. But then also, really just educating our customers how to store our beer. One of my favorite beers is a 1050, and I have 8 different years of 1050s, and my favorite thing to do is a vertical on my birthday. And it's really neat to see how the beer changes. But that beer is a good beer to store in a cellar. But perfect examples for our slushies is you don't want to put those in your closet. You want to keep those cold, and you want to drink them fresh. And so, if you don't treat that beer properly, it's going to be off. So what we've always tried to do is just really work on our, the process of just educating the customer of, how to store that beer, and then, obviously drink it as quickly as you can. I know I'm kind of all over the place, but with a fruited sour ale versus a barrel aged stout, it's just treating the beers differently.
Well, and I wanted to add to that. I think as a beer judge, I've run into this a lot, and it's kind of fun with this flight that I've got here. Now these have warmed up in the hour that they've been out fairly substantially. They're not quite room temperature. But I think a real test of a beer is that it's still delicious when it warms up. And you guys have done a phenomenal job with these. These are all just quite nice. And I think that's just a great testament to the skill of you guys. And I think it, touches on what you're talking about with Jeremy. Take care of it and you'll, a bit like beer, and it should still be good. Our next question goes to you, Dan. Any chance of sharing the homebrew recipe for vanilla shake?
I don't see why not. I don't know if I can copy and paste it in the chat here, but if you send me an email, I will get back to you with that.
Can you put your email in the chat, or I can you've already done it. That's cool. I bet you'll get more than one.
It's been, yeah. We've shared quite a few recipes along the way. We actually hosted a kind of a homebrew festival of our own a few years ago, where we polled some of our local enthusiasts into what recipe they wanted to try out, and we distributed that basic recipe. And about 6 weeks later, they came back with some samples of their homebrewed versions. And one of the winners got to come and hang out with us for a brew day, took home some beer, t-shirt, and whatnot. So it was pretty fun. And, kind of as things in San Diego have changed over the last 10, 15 years in the homebrewing community, we've definitely seen a lot of new brewers, younger brewers, crazy homebrew systems, and kind of seeing the level of quality skyrocket in that program. That event that we had was really cool.
And Dan, I just want to thank you for doing that. Probably my start as a home brewer would have been an abysmal failure as far as my wife is concerned, had New Belgium not shared their 1554 recipe with me, which I was able to follow successfully. And to this date, it's still the best beer she says that I brew. So thank you. Great question, Greco. Got just a couple of more questions, and then we will wrap this up. We're getting close to the top of the hour, so we ought to probably move these a little bit quicker. So Andrew asked the next question to you, Dan. You mentioned you tend to steep your coffee for closer to 36 hours for your lighter beers. Any particular reason for the extended extraction in the lighter versus darker beers?
Yeah. So with our coffee beer program, we've got some beers as low as 4% ABV. And with that, we've kind of had to adjust batch by batch and how we really like those beers and how they express. And on one side, 4% ABV, we started out doing kind of this like static coffee bean steep with finished beer, and we liked it, but we didn't feel like we were getting enough of the like bag of coffee aroma that I really like, where you unravel a fresh bag and you put your face in it and breathe deep. That's what we really like in coffee beers. So once we started using some different equipment in the cellar, where we were able to recirculate the beer on the coffee beans, we started trending into this process where we would soak the coffee beans for static
and
24
Dan, those
hours.
are whole beans.
Yes,
right?
whole beans. Yes.
Yep.
We would soak for a static 24 hours and then do a 12-hour long recirculation. And we started to see a really cool removal of those biscuity, cocoa nib, roasty notes that we wanted out of that coffee in those lighter styles. But on the opposite end of that, when we go into making our imperial stouts or some of our wheat wine, barley wine beers, once we hit that like 12-hour steep, and we were tasting the beers, the dreaded bell pepper would start to poke. And we determined that even if we were doing the constant recirculation for some of those beers, they would just pull even quicker. So when we trend towards the higher alcohol things, we want to make sure and keep our contact time down. But the intriguing part is that the ratio of coffee to beer is the same for all of these beers. And playing around with the origin of coffee and the roast of the coffee and the time on the beer has been our biggest focus.
So the degree of roast, what do you lean towards?
For this beer in particular, the vanilla shake, we lean on that like medium plus side. But probably about 75% of our coffee beers are medium light on the roast. And depending on the varietal, a lot of times we have a beer in the Beer Geek series called Beer Geek Breakfast. Was traditionally just a Brazilian medium plus roast, straightforward coffee oatmeal stout. But we decided one day that we would just change the coffee origin every time we made it, depending on how we felt that day. And that was a collaboration with our local coffee roasters in doing that. And for us, it's, you know, a testament towards creating a unique expression of that particular beer when we make it batch to batch, but also making a consistent product. So kind of like pushing them to bring a coffee to the table that kind of meets these parameters, but doing so in a way that allows us to explore new flavors in the finished beer.
But it sounds like you're constantly tasting. You may have anticipations for what you want, but you're doing constant tasting to make sure it's right.
Yeah, I think a better way, we know it, we envision what the finished product would be like, but then we put the time and the research and the effort into making that product, and it might not come out as we wanted it to, but we learned something along the way. And then the next application of that makes something more superior. So having some flexibility and an opportunity to learn and play around with things is really fun and exciting.
Dan, I got a quick question.
Buckeye says, anyone else like me, I don't drink coffee, but I love coffee beers. I'll have to agree with you, Buckeye. I'm a bit that way. But I will have to say, as I've learned to brew coffee right, it actually is better than I thought. It's the lousy coffee that's lousy. And if, as a brewer, if you apply the same techniques that you know how to brew beer to your coffee, it can actually be quite good. So I'm on that page, and it sounds like, Dan, your organization is quite skilled at that too. So I'd love to have some of your coffee sometime.
Yeah.
Can I add a quick question to that subject?
Yes, please, Jeremy.
So we work with, this is Michael. We work
Michael.
with local coffee roasters around here too, and we completely understand the bell pepper, dreaded, horrible bell pepper part of beers. And we've done a lot of trials of doing right after the roast, so we get the off-gassing in the tank to get a lot of those extreme flavors to come out with a very short time span. Do you guys work with anything like that, or do you just get it when you get it and try to make the best of it?
It's kind of funny. We work primarily with two very different coffee roasters, and both of them very much understand what we're looking for in the coffee, but one of them won't deliver it to us unless it's off gassed for at least 24 hours, and that's per their standards, based on how they've developed their portfolio. The other roaster is very much more apt to kind of that experimentation. So we've done a couple trials where we've pulled the beer in onto just like hours roasted, and some's that, it's 5 days old, in the coffee in the package. But on average, we're probably getting 24, 48 hour after roasting. And whether we store it in like a 55-gallon drum or, bin, covered and sealed and purged, or in little 5-pound sealed bags, it's pretty consistent across the board.
But Michael, you've found it differently? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I think coffee is so unstable. Every bean is different. Every roast is different. Every roaster is different. So I was just asking on his the coffee purveyors that he works with and how they like to treat it, because we've also had certain coffee roasters that said 48 hours minimum before they'll even hand us the coffee, because they don't feel like the beans have developed. And we're trying to do the science side of things, saying we want the beans to develop in the beer so we could try to get the flavor from it. So it's just open-ended question.
No, but I love it. It's a great question. Andrew appreciates it also. All right, we are almost done here. We've got a question from Craig and one from Kurt and another one for Craig. So we'll do these quickly. For anyone, if there were a beer that you could brew with no regards to cost, production, or sales, what would it be and why?
American Adjunct Lager.
That's an unexpected comment. Anybody else?
We pretty much do what we want. But if it would be, we really get in trouble on our. I mean, it goes back to our pastry stouts. The hardest part is making it where it's affordable on the shelf. So my wife, she's the one who runs the brewery, and she's the one that handles the money. So what happens the most is we're losing money. We can't brew this beer anymore. And I go, but have you tasted? It's so damn good. We got to keep brewing it. So she's like, do you want to stay in business? And I'm like, yes, ma'am. And she says, we can't do it again.
That's true for all of us that are married, Jeremy. Are you just now figuring that out?
Yeah. As a business partner, it's tough sometimes, but we've been putting up with each other for 20 years.
Well, congratulations. Good for you. Next question comes from Kurt. Can you share some of the variants of vanilla shake? And I'm sure that goes to you, Dan.
We use the base beer, sans vanilla and sans coffee, as a blank canvas for a lot of our beers. And I'm confident you guys do a similar thing, Michael, for your festival. But most recently, we've started to dabble in the peanut butter and jelly flavor profile. We really love messing around with coconut in all of its iterations. One of our favorites is maple and vanilla. We did for our 4th anniversary, which would have been on April 19th. We've only celebrated our 1st anniversary so far, and every year since then has been chaotic. So we were really excited to celebrate our 4th anniversary this year, but the world happened, and we had this beer ready to go, and it was little salted pretzels, a ton of peanut butter powder, and chocolate bars, and that made something really, really fun. And it totally transformed the base beer and made something as close to like pastry style stout that we've made. 14.7%. You wouldn't know it. That was a fun beer to make, but man, it was hell getting those pretzels out of a 15-barrel fermenter.
I can see this coming. We need to have one on the most dangerous beers.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like all of you guys can come up with some pretty sneaky beers.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good question, Kurt. We're down to our last question, which Craig has asked to anyone. How do you come up with a new flavor? What is your process?
My favorite thing to do is usually on a Friday night, start drinking beer, then whiskey, then go out back and smoke a cigar and just start writing stuff down. Usually if I can read it the next day, then it's a good enough idea. If I can't read it, then it's not. And so that's all seriously, that's how we come up with some of the beers that we brew and even some of the names. But, I found that, even me and our brewers and everyone else in the brewery, the joke is the drunker you are, the more creative you are. And if you can write it down and read it, then it's golden.
Can anybody top that one?
I've tried doing that with drugs and it's never worked out. But my way of going about it is I usually find a flavor that I really enjoy, and I cook a lot. So I like to break it down to figure out how to recreate it, whether I'm at a restaurant or a bar or a brewery. And I just find something that's really unique. It's like, well, I can make that in beer. And then 10 batches later, I've came up with it, but it's never the first time that wins it. It always takes a moment.
Yeah.
Also, chemistry is not my background, so I have a hard time with that.
Chris says we need to put it on a T-shirt. What would it be if you can read it in the morning? It must be good.
Well, I'm gonna hold this up. If you can see it through my phone. But this is the pastry. Let me get back to it. The cake. Sorry, I've got a delay on there. But that's the strawberry cake, and so we use 300 pounds of that cake to brew that stout. And so the fat kid in me loves taking food and, just kind of creating that of how can we make a beer taste like that? And it's taken us a long time to kind of perfect that. But, the fat kid in me has done a pretty good job doing it.
All right. Well, that is the end of our questions. I think our time is wrapping up late on a Friday, or at least those that are on the East Coast. Those who are on the West Coast maybe are just getting started. But this was such a lot of fun, guys. And Chris has posted in there, for those of you that are not part of the Beer Buyers Club and would like to take part in an event like this, I am just so impressed. And I was talking to one of the brewers today, how through a result of this club, you can get some of the freshest beers from all over the country and then have a discussion with the brewer. I mean, these beers that I'm trying are so fresh and delicious. And, otherwise I couldn't have come up with them. So this is phenomenally good. Buckeye says, cheers, everyone. Be safe. Kurt says, thanks for sharing. Andrew says, this was a great experience, especially amongst this chaos. Thank you so much, guys. And I think that summarizes it pretty well. This was a lot of fun. What a privilege to hear from the brewers themselves and talk about their babies. So any last minute comments? Jeremy, want to start with you? We've kind of done that on your brewery. Just 30 seconds.
Well, hopefully we get to have Great American Beer Festival this year. If you go, come by and see us. We always bring the most craziest beers that we save just for the festival. There's talks that it may get pushed to December, but if you're on here with us tonight, come by, say hi. I hang out at the booth the whole entire time, but I love talking to people and I love talking beer, and that's the reason why we do what we do.
Michael, 30 seconds, wrap up.
Thanks everybody for coming out here or showing up on the computer screen and watching it or listening. And through all this is drink good beer, support local businesses, and make sure to help your neighbors out if you can. Don't get too close though.
And Dan, final comments?
Ditto. Really happy that we got to do this. It's nice seeing a lot of the support out there and people getting excited about beers, even in times like these. But we're going to get through it, and it's going to give us even more time to get drunk and come up with crazier beers. So it's all going to benefit everybody. So we'll see you out there.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody that joined us today. You spent so much time with us, and we've had so much fun. We've had all these delicious beers to go through, and I can't wait to do it. We're going to do it again next week. We will do it again next Friday. And we're going to be talking to Jason Spalding from Brewery Vivant from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Matt Hess from Matt Hess from River North Brewery. So that will be a lot of fun. We'll have a lot of fun doing that. The webinar is recorded. We're also going to produce a podcast from this, and I look forward to seeing you next week. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. This is the first time we've had 3 brewers, and this was just a perfect evening night. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Cheers.